part two of the 9 segments of a very unusual spiritual awakening. It's a true story. It's been happening to me. It started in '78. Last week, or at the end of segment 1, we left off with talking about the seed movement and then coming back to California. And when I got back here, I told it to a lot of people, what happened. And at the time, we didn't really know the significance. We didn't put any kind of a religious or spiritual meaning to it. Just weren't sure what it meant. I just felt it applied to me because the 22 number, the number 22 all my life was an unlucky number for me before this all started. It's not an unlucky number for me anymore, but because I know what 22 means, or at least I have a better spiritual understanding of it. 22 was unlucky for me before because I associated it with bad things, like the Kennedy assassination was on the 11th month and the 22nd day in 1963. Well, 22 is, 11 is 22 twice. And also number 22, Johnny Padres on the Dodgers, was my favorite player. And he was 22 in Los Angeles. His number was 22. He was 45 in Brooklyn, and then it became 22. And for most of his career, it was 22. And he never won 20 games, even though he was a very good pitcher. And he won a lot of big games for the Dodgers, including bringing them their first World Championship in Brooklyn in 1955 in the 7th game of the World Series against the Yankees. But then his number was 45. Well, it was 22 in Los Angeles, the number. And the closest he ever came to winning 20 games was one season in the early 60s. He had 18 wins, I think, and 5 losses at the beginning of September. And his father died. And I guess because of how close he was to his father, he just was grieving for the rest of the season. I don't think he had another start after that. He didn't win another game. I'm not sure, but I don't think he even had another start after that, after his father died there that year. So he only wound up with 18 wins. He was 18-5. So again, I associated that with the number 22 as being an unlucky number. So in 1978 was an interesting year for me because before the seed movement, in March of '78, my wife of 8 months left me. We dated for 3 months, we lived together 9 months, and we were married for 8 months. So 20 months we were together, and 19 of the 20 were some of the greatest months of my life. But the last month was rough, and I believe she left me. At the time I didn't know why, but I think it was because she had found a letter that I had written before I knew her. I had written to this girl that she knew. It was in the community theater, and we hung out. I was just starting to hang out with people in community theater, and I had gone out with this girl a few times, and I really liked her, and I wrote a really good letter, and I kept a copy of the letter. It was a big mistake on my part to keep a copy of a letter I sent to this girl. Well, then I met Carol afterwards, after there was no chance of getting together with this girl that I wrote the letter for. She just wanted to be friends. I had totally forgotten about that letter that I'd written to her when I knew Carol and my wife. And when Carol found that letter that I had written, even though she could see the date on it, and the date was before I ever even knew Carol, she was upset because she had told me once after we were together, she had told me about her first husband who cheated on her, and one of the ones he cheated on her with was this girl that I had written this letter to. So finding a letter, a really good love letter to a girl, I really wanted to know her better. and expressed how I really was crazy about her and everything. Finding that letter to that girl, even though it was written before I ever knew my wife, it was not good. Because 3 weeks later she left, and we never were able to reconcile, and the marriage was over. So that was, you know, a lot of people blame what happened afterwards, my spiritual awakening that happened in '79, which started with the seed movement in '78, but still I didn't know about the spiritual part yet. Even in '79, when the awakening happened, I didn't know about the spiritual connection of the seed movement at that time yet. But a lot of my relatives and friends blamed her leaving, blamed my beliefs and what happened to me. They blamed it on her leaving me and said that that's what caused me to go crazy, you know. Well, I don't think it was a matter of going crazy. I think what it was, that God wanted me to have some good times before I had to go through this strong test, and that she wouldn't have been able to go through it with me. I had to go through this alone. And that's why she wound up leaving me on a higher level, on a transcendental level. I believe we have two simultaneous realities going on here at the same, you know, two realities at the same time. The mundane level, which I call the everyday, workaday world, where you're seeing me telling you about the spiritual awakening. This is the mundane level. You know, just me, a retired guy that's now 66 years old, talking about this. And that's the mundane level. The transcendental level is what's going on in the spiritual world at the same time, or who we really are, you know, in our subconscious or superconscious, what we're not aware of consciously. But anyway, 78 was ups and downs. I started to, I was really depressed for a while after she left, and I was drinking heavily. And a friend of mine said, you know, you shouldn't drink so much, and he said you should smoke pot instead. And I'd never been much of a pot user before then. So I took his advice, and I stopped drinking and started to smoke pot more. And it made a difference. I started to feel better. You know, I was getting over Carol, and I was starting to feel really good for most of '78. And even the end of '78, I went back for 2 weeks at Christmas time and had a white Christmas for the first time since I was a kid. I went back to Vermont, and we had a white Christmas in '78 at my brother Jack's. It was a great time. But when I got back, I was starting to get depressed again, because there was this girl I wanted to go out with, and she's pretty much turned me down. She just, again, she wanted to be friends. It was a case of they always wanted to be friends with me, and that was it. You know, so I guess I wasn't very attractive to most women, and that I was attracted to. Of course, that's probably the same story for a lot of people. So I started getting depressed again, and I wound up having an ulcer. Before that, I don't want to forget this. I went to a concert in '78, I think it was in the fall or summer, late summer or fall of '78 in Orange County in California, and I saw Waylon Jennings, and when he got out there, he started singing songs by all my favorite people. You know, he did the Buddy Holly song. He did some Hank Williams, and he mentioned Mickey Newberry and Newberry Train songs and Luckenbach, Texas. And then of all things, he did a Doris Day song, Sentimental Journey, which really blew my mind, because it was totally off the wall for Waylon Jennings to be doing a Doris Day song. And, you know, Doris Day being my favorite female vocalist. So I felt like it was really weird that these songs were all for me. And the date that I had that time that I went with, I think she was a born-again Christian, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember her name. I didn't have too many dates with her. But it was a double date with, I think, Bill Hayes, my friend, that he had, or his wife, and then me and this girl, that I don't remember her name now. But I thought it was interesting. It was like everything he was doing was for me. It was almost, you know, of course it wasn't, you know, not Not in the mundane world. Maybe in the transcendental world, I think there's a good chance it was, but in the mundane reality, it was not for me. Anyway, in February of '79, I was so depressed by then that I had an ulcer. And February 22nd, I think it was, I had this diagnosis of an ulcer. So I decided to go on a diet, to get my act together, and I wound up in March or April, it was April, the beginning of April, I went on a diet, and I went 20 days and lost 20 pounds or 21 pounds in 20 days. No dough, no drinking, 1,800 calories a day was my limit, 5 days a week. 2 days I would fast. And I'd exercise twice a day, running up and down a hill and doing isometric exercises. And I started to feel really, really good. I felt like I was finally in the best shape that I'd ever been in. At the end of the diet, I think it was the 20th of April was the last day of the diet in '79, and that's when coincidences started to accelerate in my life, and we'll get to those coincidences, or whatever you want to call them. I don't really think they're just coincidences. I think they're connections that connect us all, and were relevant to the awakening, the spiritual awakening that I was about to go through. We'll get to that in segment 3. Thank you.